Come, spellweavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, where we make old school young again. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, and tonight is another edition of Get in the Ring. I've got the Wonkee here with me, and we are going to be talking all about the aesthetics of RPG books. I'm very excited about this topic, with Wonkee being the artistic brains behind Guts and Glory. He's got a lot to say on this topic, so we're going to have a good time tonight. This is going to be a great conversation. Before we jump into that, though, I want to remind everyone to like, share, and subscribe. That's one of the best ways to let people know what we're doing over here. Just give us that little bump in the algorithm. That's always helpful. And also want to remind people you can find me on various social media platforms, including X and Instagram. On X and Instagram, I am at Howard_Ryan Gregg. YouTube is Rollin Bones. Twitch is twitch.tv/RollinBonesRyan, and Substack is rollinbones.substack.com. You can find the link to my Substack here in chat. You can also find it pinned below this video. I'm currently working on an article that's going to be kind of a prototype for something that might be released at some point in the future. Basically, I'm going to be working on two different articles that are about black powder weapons and dueling. Not just talking about the concepts like I have in the past, but actually giving some framework or rules that you can use to implement these ideas at your table. So that's coming up. I'm also working on a second short story set in the world of Nighthaven. I'm about 75% of the way done with my first draft on that. Then it'll go to the editor, and then it'll go up on Substack. So that's what you can expect from me over on Substack. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on my guest on all episodes of Get in the Ring. You guys know him and love him. He is a great artist and a great friend, my business partner in Guts and Glory, and my partner in crime in life. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Wonkee.
Hello. Thank you for having me once again, Mr. Bonehead. I am super excited to be here. We are going to have one hell of a chat. Oh man,
Yes,
this is going to be fun. Also, all that stuff that you were talking about just a second ago, all these upcoming projects. Heck yeah, dude, I'm excited to see those like black powder rules and ideas you have going on. More stories. Yes, absolutely. Hell yeah, dude.
Sweet. So yeah, I mean, like we talked about beforehand, and as the title of this episode suggests, we are talking about the aesthetic qualities of role-playing books, and there's a lot of ground to cover on this particular topic. With you being an artist, and with me kind of taking my first steps into this world, not just of writing, but of visual design, as I've done a little bit of already. Let's talk a little bit about our inspiration. So let's begin with you. As far as the aesthetics of your work and books and things like that, where do you draw some of your biggest influence from?
Yeah, so this might actually throw you off a little bit, but my biggest artistic inspirations and kind of how I hope for one day Bellafallo to look is kind of this weird dumpster baby brainchild between something like H.R. Geiger. I absolutely love his work, his airbrush, everything just about it. The vibe, I've adored it since I was a child. I connect with it. On top of that, you have Beatrix Potter, who isn't known for anything really of this fantastical space. You're seeing a lot of those old, like, watercolory Peter Rabbit style children's books. She was a I don't know much about her as a lady, to be honest. But then you also have like Bernie Wrightson,
Mhm.
absolute masterful inker who you just can't get better. So between our influences, though, I mean, I'm surrounded by art books and shelves upon shelves of cool dungeon modules and that kind of a thing. So, oh man, that's a really broad question. That's a really broad question. What are my biggest inspirations and influences? Life, history, and pretty much what I named so far. On top of a mountain of other shit I found interesting, cool, or useful.
Mhm.
What about you?
Yeah, so for me, art wise, I really kind of I my first exposure to art was comic books. So
Makes
a lot of comic book art I find very inspirational. If we're talking about specific artists within the realm of comic books, um, honestly, I've really been drawn to people like John Byrne and John Buscema and Frank Miller. A lot of
Oh yeah,
these
Miller,
influences is
absolutely.
where I really dig comics. I do like some '90s stuff. I like Jim Lee. I like Todd McFarlane. But honestly, that kind of stuff. And then I really like the painted pulp art. Um,
I was gonna get into that. Oh yeah, my biggest influence is old pulp magazines and old pulp novels, dime novels, that kind of thing. My man.
yeah, and there's a lot of kind of crossover. Like I think Bernie Wrightson did some pulp art in addition to his comic work. I know some pulp artists did work on very early comic books. For like Malachi here in chat is bringing up Frazetta. Frazetta is a big influence. At this point, though, like two fantasy nerds on a show like this saying that they're influenced by Frazetta is like a band saying they're influenced by the Beatles. Like,
Mainly those dumb truck butts.
but when it comes to the specific aesthetics of role playing games, um, one of the one of the games that really changed my outlook on how a role playing game should look or what is possible for a role playing game is Dungeon Crawl Classics. And I'm actually going to share
Yes.
something real quick here.
Kovacs was my first kind of hero within the RPG scene. I instantly was drawn to the DCC vibe, attitude, aesthetic, all of that.
Mhm. And just to bring up an image here real quick, there's a couple images like this in DCC. I'm going to zoom out so that you guys can see it a little bit more fully on your screen. This right here, this title page, this comes from this specific type of title page. Also, kind of ties in with the comic influence that I was talking about because this thematic like the title being worked into some kind of like broader image that's a Will Eisner thing, and it's also a Jim Steranko thing. um
People have been doing that a long time.
and so like when I saw this, I immediately was thinking Nick Fury and the Spirit, and
Oh,
I was hooked because you don't see this in 5e in modern gaming art. You don't see this a lot. It's all very sterile, and this is not sterile. This is um it's very bold, it's very evocative, it makes a statement, and there's something just kind of antithetical to the modern sensibilities of aesthetics in a piece like this.
yeah, absolutely. It is something that what I think a lot of just artsiness has lost a touch of something that's inherently playful to it, to where
Mhm.
it not just it excites you to read, sure, but it evokes you to be like drawn into the work itself on a deeper level. Because I mean, when you think about what is a picture doing, it's communicating some form of visual information. You know, the whole picture's worth a thousand words, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
But when you can use the two in tandem to reinforce one another, which is what a good dungeon module is supposed to do, then you have a magic thing to where it, one pings to the other to the, back and forth. And even with something like a title page like that, it can really just bring out this extra oomph that you don't get without a visual interest.
Mhm.
Because, like, if that page just said DCC RPG in giant bold font, it would suck.
Yeah. Yeah, but let's see. Malachi in chat here is calling out Keith Parkinson. That's a good
Mm,
shout out. Yeah, we can talk forever about specific RPG artists. I know I've talked ad nauseum about David Sutherland's Paladin in Hell,
mm,
um, but I bring up Dungeon Crawl Classics, and I will come back to the DCC core book here in a few minutes to kind of illustrate some points. But one of the reasons why I want to talk with you about this, and one of the reasons why I think this is an important topic to address, especially early on in the creative process, there are a lot of RPG books out there, more than have ever been produced, probably just because the barrier to entry is so low. That means there's a lot of people out there to impress. There's a lot of noise out there. How do you rise above everyone doing what seems like the same idea over and over again? How do you really kind of catch people's attention with what you're doing? And one of the fastest ways to get that in this medium that has been, very, it's become a very visual medium, is to have a tight, not necessarily clean, but a tight, legible aesthetic that immediately evokes a sense of emotion out of people and immediately, um, you know, gets them to latch on to the words on the page, even if the words on the page aren't the most interesting thing. You present it in such a way where it becomes memorable.
yes, absolutely. Oh man, there's a lot to go on there. So, oh boy, how do you make a project that stands out and above the rest? Well, obviously you make good shit, one and first and foremost. But I do believe that there is something in Seth Godin's Purple Cow idea, in that you have to stand out and you have to make yourself stand out, and you kind of advertise what makes you stand out above the rest. In
Mhm.
that sense, there is kind of a natural selection of ideas, not just based on being in the ring of, the market with everything else, but also how far someone is willing to push that idea into the center of that ring.
Yep.
Because, I mean, drive and the correct actions leading up to a successful project are just as important as having a kick ass project.
Yeah.
um, there was a big second part, though, which is a whole different cow to start eating, which is how do you evoke that emotion? How do you get drawn in and sucked in? Because there's a huge difference between a school textbook and a good RPG adventure or something of that nature.
Yeah.
You get drawn in, you're sucked. It might as well be a comic book or something of that nature. It kind of becomes that all encompassing, almost hallucinogenic experience to where you're one with the rules and understanding thing, and oh, that's cool. That happens and it's awesome, but you can't just rely on the hope that that happens. It has to be cultivated. Now,
Mhm.
how do you do that? Through intentional design process. When I look at a project like Greg Gillespie's Barrow Maze, this thing is so well worn, it's fallen apart and everything, but just a quick flip through. Every page of this is illustrated in some way, shape, or means through beautiful headers, through cool text, everything in between, and it creates a cohesive environment for your imagination to take place within.
Mhm.
Not part of the game, but the book itself becomes, yeah, an environment for imagination, is the way I view it. And then there's countless projects that do it right and there's countless that do it wrong, and I just like, man, we're gonna have a good talk today. I
Yeah.
don't want to just ramble, so I'll stop there. Ugh, getting
Yeah.
spicy.
And before we get kind of too far afield of talking specifically about aesthetics that really evoke this. I'll once again go to DCC. This is the entry on the thief, the very beginning. Um, and the thing I like so much about this is, yes, you have this big text box here, and I know like Malachi and Luau Lu and Chad are talking a little bit about some of the changes that Goodman might be making to new editions of the core book. I hope this is not something that they plan on changing, because this right here is brilliant.
Big
Um,
shout out to Lou. That dude's the best.
oh yeah,
Love that man.
Lou is
Big fan.
amazing. But like right here, you've got a guard, and then below this building, you have a grate where there are people trying to bring treasure out of this building, or maybe out of a dungeon below the building. And then up here, you have a thief doing some second story work. Um, your attention is supposed to be on the text here, but in the periphery, and not taking too much attention from this text, you have things that reinforce the text. You have this idea of a thief being reinforced, and not in the way that Watsy did it in the fifth edition core book, where you have some drow with daggers posing. You have characters doing thief things on this page. And so you can see this image and see this word. And even though you should read the text of the book, I am firmly advocating for RTFM. You can take a look at this image and this title and understand what a thief is. That's brilliant.
Absolutely. And I like too, because on your earlier point of how you see various thiefly activities, but everything's kind of only half described to a certain sense. You don't know why that top character's reaching up. They're climbing, maybe they're trying to break in something. Every element to the added pictures reinforces the imaginative, what is a thief doing? What are they supposed to be doing? And it makes you want to learn more. Not
Mhm.
only that, but if you look at the composition of the page, you have that big flat bar down below, and the way the thief is reaching up towards the actual title, the actual composition of the art reinforces the readability of the text.
Yep,
It's a wonderful, masterful design. I love DCC. It's a good book
it is.
and
It
game.
is. Yep. Yeah,
And the
but
whole book's like that. The
it
whole
is.
book is like that. And MCC is no different. They're equally beautiful and amazing.
Mhm.
Shout out to Wampler.
Yep. Absolutely. Shout out to Wampler. That'll be a great get in the ring future episode, when you and I talk to Jim together on the
Oh,
stream.
he's going
That
to be
that'll be
asking us riddles like some crazy sphinx or something.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
love it.
But yeah, like we've talked a little bit about what makes a good aesthetic, and we've shown some examples here. Um, let's pivot a little bit and talk about some of the pitfalls that are out there as far as aesthetics go. One of the big ones that I see right now, especially in the circles that we run in, is there is an overemphasis on making your book look a certain way, and that certain way is matching the style of the very earliest RPGs. Um, like there is this almost religious commitment to, let's make everything look like it was written in the 70s. The problem there, in my opinion, is the books look that way in the 70s because that's how they had to look. They were limited by the tools that they had at their disposal. Watsy, or not Watsy, TSR books released in the 90s don't look like that. They look different. They look better. The content is not as good, in my opinion, but layout tools came a long way. You were starting to see people using computers to do layout, and so you get a different look, you get a different aesthetic, and it looks better. It's more legible, it's more readable, even though the content's not as good as the original was, but there's this kind of slavish devotion to this really awful, overly minimalist aesthetic. So, like, kind of give me your thoughts on that. What do you think about what I just said there, or
Yes.
and what do you think about that aesthetic choice as
Okay.
a whole?
So I'm going to round back to retro fetishism, but essentially, I don't like describing different design choices as
Hmm.
good or bad because I think a really good example is the Project Humblewood. It's totally out of my wheelhouse for the things I would kind of run or do. It's, I think, a fifth ed supplement of like furry red wall owl people and like it's cutesy Disney Robin Hood kind of a thing. But it's painted out very well, the text matches really nicely, and it all fits together super nice as a cohesive project. It's not my personal type of game, but that is very good. And so when I am thinking of pitfalls, I'm usually thinking of projects that lack clear design intention, and I need to
Yeah.
heavily emphasize that. It's not within the content necessarily, because that's subjective.
Yeah.
Now, what do I think about? Okay, there is nothing wrong with an homage to the things that have been. I study the masters like weekly. It's
Yeah.
just what happens. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying the certain aesthetics and elements that went into that. I'm thinking of the North Texas Convention yearly modules that like Tom Wilson and Bad Mike are doing, that kind of a thing. Like
Hmm.
they kick ass. It's very old school to a T. I think Greg Gillespie doing these homage covers with his, Forbidden Caverns here, and he has a whole line where he does this kind of like retro duotone thing going on. I think that's really cool, but the thing that I don't like is I see a lot of I'm gonna just nail the hammer right down. I see a lot of bad and lazy art being used and just calling it old school when it's a
Yeah.
mismatched, just disgusting collage of things that don't make sense together. And I get not having an art budget, but that's a whole different thing.
Hmm.
Um, I see a lot of people making do-it-yourself old school projects that just say, "Oh, this is black and white line work. It fits." And that's fucking lame. It doesn't
Yeah.
fit. It looks bad. You're not thinking about this as think of it like different fonts if you're not an artist. You don't just scramble fonts all around your text. You choose a couple good ones and you stick to it?
Yeah.
It's what do I think about this? I think it doubles the one thing I really don't like about the OSR movement, and that it's centered around retro fetishism. There
Hmm.
isn't a good reason beyond it's good old reliable, which I like missionary too, but like
Yeah.
you see where I'm getting at
Yeah.
here. Like
Hmm.
that's all it is to me. It's like cool. What's next? Because we've beat this dead horse as far as design goes. You can add in different types of content for sure, but
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
I'll use the analogy because this analogy is used so often by kind of people in the OSR sphere. Punk rock. Punk rock was developed as a very specific style by guys who could only play up to a certain level of musicianship.
Yeah.
And the people who were pioneers of that genre will tell you that with a straight face. Before they all passed away, each of the individual Ramones would tell you that they were not good musicians,
I
but
see what you're saying.
they worked within the skill set and the tools that they had and made something that really took off and really resonated with people. However, in the wake of the Ramones
I
and
was
the
so
Sex
ready to fight you
Pistols,
for a second. Okay, continue on. Earlier, I thought you were saying punk rock's trash. I was like,
no,
oh, yeah, gotcha. Continue
no,
on.
but in the wake of the pioneers of this genre, you now have this blueprint for the lazy. You have this excuse that people can use now to not reach their ceiling, to not push beyond the bounds of mediocrity. You can be a bunch of grungy dudes who can barely play their instruments and sit like essentially give that to yourself as an artificial ceiling and say, I don't have to practice beyond this point. I don't have to become skilled beyond this point because these dudes from New York were able to do that successfully. So I can now put on this aesthetic as my excuse, my insurance policy, my crutch. I can lean on this and say, I'm just a punk rocker, when all you are is a slacker who has
Yeah,
decided to
I love
take
you.
on something that someone else did and use that as an excuse to be mediocre.
Absolutely. And I'll tag on to that because I wholeheartedly agree, and you got this steam train going. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay, so not only that, but it has a lot of the same problems, the punk rock scene as a whole, that the modern gaming scene has, in that it's become self-referential to the point where the entire thing has taken on an inbred nature. It isn't
Mm.
raw and it isn't real anymore, and it's become stagnant, but it can't tell it's stagnant. And so what you're seeing is this a facade of a dead culture kind of lingering around while something else is wearing its suit. I think you're actually the one that gave me that analogy initially, is that D&D in modern days is kind of wearing the skin suit of what it used to be.
Yeah.
I see the exact same thing with the punk rock music scene. Is punk died.
Mhm. Yeah, and the other thing about this style, um, both in role playing games and in punk, you have this very early um, primitive primal style. I'll switch bands and I'll go to the Clash now for my punk example. Um, you start off with something like London Calling, fantastic album. I like it a lot. However, Mick Jones did not continue the rest of his career trying to make London Calling over and over and over again. He ended up leaving The Clash and founding Big Audio Dynamite and going off into kind of different genre explorations. You have a lot of punk guys who leave kind of the nest of punk that they begin in and start exploring different sounds. They start incorporating different elements. You also see this in role playing game. Gary Gygax's books did not continue to look like White Box throughout the rest of his career. You see him use different layouts and add to his vision of role playing over time. You see really kind of all the early pioneers will take on new elements of game design and try to experiment with different things in their books. When you limit yourself to, I'm going to basically stay at the starting point my entire career. Again, that's the limitation that you have put on yourself. That's the way that you have artificially handicapped yourself, is by saying, if I leave this particular style, I'm selling out. When what you're really saying is, I'm afraid to leave this because what if I mess up? What if I fail? So you stay in what you're comfortable with and use the excuse of, well, this is just the style that people expect from me at this point.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I feel a good thought formulating. It's not quite there yet. I have something brewing though.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm like, with everything, you have to understand where a lot of this stuff comes, like the context of where it comes, and that's really the heart of the problem with retro fetishism. Um, when you take a look at things from a specific time period, you have to take into account the tools that they were working with at the time and the age of the people who were creating it. And like, this isn't me now, justifying like disclaimers or anything like that at all by any means. But you have to take in mind the context of what these people were working with and how they would later iterate in their career. When you hyper focus on a specific time period and say, we are only going to work within this ethos, it's a limit that shouldn't be there. There's no reason to do it unless you're specifically doing it for like a one-off, something like a North Texas adventure where, North Texas is so focused on that early period of role-playing games. Having a retro module released specifically for that audience, cool. That's a good use of that aesthetic and that look. And none of what the people who do those modules put out looks lazy, in my opinion. At least, nothing that I've seen looks lazy. It's the people who that's all they do. That's the problem. That's where the issue comes from, in my opinion. And unfortunately, there's a lot of those people.
Yes, I see a lot of people hiding behind the retro aesthetic for lazy reasons. Absolutely. I, though, don't believe that it can't be refined to the highest quality. I'm going to name drop Gillespie for the 15th time this event or this session we're in here.
Yeah.
But I mean, I genuinely believe he has masterfully crafted the best of old school adventure material because it is so true to what was in every matter that counts, yet it has been tweaked and detailed in so many little ways that really just have upgraded it into a whole new and enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
Um, but with that, I think one of the main keys to what makes this product line successful is that he went all in with retroism as his branding there. You
Yeah.
know, he's not putting out these colorful 5th edition books right next to it. That would be a mess. And I think with what started out in your talk a little bit earlier there is people do have very strict limitations when you start out in any kind of creative endeavor. We're finding this out, firsthand right now.
Yeah.
But with that, I believe that as you become more and more successful, you gain more recognition and you have more finances available for your project. So much of that is focused on either just reinvesting or expanding what you're already doing, but so little towards experimenting with how to actually move the game forward. And I think
Mhm.
that just further stagnates the pool, honestly. I would
Yeah.
love to see some of these big dog companies using a dollar to actually do something interesting or unique or cool, but you stick with what sells. And so it's stuck to us indies to get the heavy lifting done.
Yeah.
Which, you know what? I'm okay with that. Never before have we had more potential for opportunity at our hands, and the bar's never been lower. Yes. Like,
Mhm.
there's cool people making cool shit, and they stand out so high above the rest.
Yeah.
We've name dropped 20 people, like Lou and everyone else that, we've mentioned. They're making the most amazing stuff. Like, I view them like rock stars. They're doing it.
Mhm.
This is the real deal. And
Yeah.
then we talked about it last episode. We have our dabblers, which I think is okay. If it's all you can afford with your free time, just dabble. Just know you're dabbling.
Yeah.
Um, but then, if you are trying to really make a successful and interesting project that will stand the test of time, I think you really need to be focused and intentional with the kind of design and art you're using for that. It really
Mhm.
does make a difference because at the end of the day, a slapdash mess doesn't float to the top.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the best way to describe my main problem with what we've been talking about, these traditional OSR kind of books, is a lot of it seems slapdash.
Yeah. It does. And this gets into where, we can kind of move away from negative, complaints that we have about specific things, and talk about positive steps that
Yes.
creators like us can take when it comes to understanding and developing this. And that is, like you mentioned with Greg Gillespie, uh, commitment to a specific unified aesthetic for a work that reinforces the heart of what your work is. And this is it. It's a simple thing to say, it's a hard thing to come up with. So let's
It
talk a
is.
little bit about this idea. A unified aesthetic that underscores the kind of central idea of your work.
Absolutely. And it's hard. It's a very hard thing to do, not just because it's hard to do the actual thinking process of what do I want this to visually look like. Then you got to find a team of the right people that you can afford and that can actually finish the job. Yeah, that's a miracle situation. So there is going to be some settling, and that's just the fact of a low budget industry for the most part.
Yeah.
Is, you're not working with millions of dollars and you don't get to hire Frazetta, Bernie Wrights, and Boris Vallejo and whoever else tickles your fancy. It's not going to happen. It's probably never going to happen. So you need to find people that not only fit the project, but that you like working with. And so there's going to be some work involved in that.
Yeah.
Now, a thing that I think is a good first step is not just notebooking it out, but start maybe come up with a set of who would be your dream artists, and then come up with your pool of available artists. And then I wouldn't even discount AI, because we talked about it, and some people are going to be using this in the future. I'm not going to bash on those people, but they have the obligation 3 times more than anyone else to be a good goddamn art director.
Yeah.
Because that's my main thing. I don't talk about this often, but there's a big blacklist I have of people who are really bad art directors and I will not work with again for that sole reason. I will not take the coin. It's not worth the headache. Um, so if you're going to be doing all that on your own, you need to actually kind of figure out what you're doing. I would look at the book Framed Ink by I have one of his other books here, Marcos Matteo Mestre. Just look up Framed Ink. It is the best guide to visual storytelling and composition, which is how a book reads at the
Hmm.
end of the day. And so I would look through that. It's not hard reading. It's very user friendly, let's call it, and put in layman's terms throughout the entirety of the text. So it's going to be useful to anyone getting into this on their own accord for art director stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't want to ramble too hard. Sorry, redirect
Yeah.
me.
To appropriately enough to bring up some imagery that underlines the theme that we are discussing
Oh,
here. This is something from one of our Facebook chats that we've had. This is from a Warhammer module, and you will have to remind me of which one.
this is
But
one of the old Warhammer Fantasy Tomb Kings modules.
gotcha.
Or not modules, uh, army books,
Mhm.
whatever they were called.
Gotcha.
It's not a codex.
Because when we first started talking about this idea of unifying aesthetic and how to work that into layout and how to, really run with this concept of having a unified aesthetic, this was one of the first examples that you brought up to me. So I'm just going to show some of these pages here so that people can see what we're talking about. I'm sure some of you out there have this book or have seen this book before. Um, but the Egyptian theme is continuously brought forward through the art. The art pieces are very they're top quality, but they also all fit within this Egyptian aesthetic. They all the border work, the art pieces themselves, the font choices, it all reinforces this Egyptian aesthetic, and it's all just it's so beautiful.
And I
And
would like to note that it's not as crazy of an endeavor as it may seem, because I've
yeah,
dissected this book probably 15 times over from a very analytical point of view, and a lot of these backgrounds are reused with such slight modifications, just a different cracking applied in one corner while it's not on a different page. These things aren't as unattainable as one might think if you know what you're looking to do.
yeah,
I found a major problem with this book, though, and it was after I was having breakfast with Greg Gillespie. At the 15th time his name gets dropped.
hmm,
Um, and he made a very, very good case about white or no, about black text on white background being incredibly important, and it's for legibility reasons. Because I'm gonna butcher basically what he said, but it really hit home with me, in that you need to be writing and presenting for people that don't have great eyes. A lot of our friend group and mentor figures aren't going to be able to read half of this book with the way I'm looking at right under carrion. Is there a word before the? Because I mean, like, there's a lot of spaces where I'm kind of even scrambling my eyes around, and I like it for aesthetic purposes, but I do think that the actual text boxes could be cleaned up. With
Mhm.
that, I love how they're presented with text overlapping on art and it's all framed. Such a cool book. Love it. And
Yep.
I don't think this is minimalist by any means,
Oh
but it's
no.
very legible.
Hmm.
Besides the gray background, I'm kind of like, oh, that might be bad. But who knows?
And that's a trap that so many people fall into, and this isn't even taking like retro fetishism into account. The trap of minimalism. A lot of people see minimalism being kind of a trendy aesthetic choice, not even in books, just in like modern culture. You see minimalism everywhere. It's not always appropriate.
Mm-mm.
It's often widely inappropriately applied, in my opinion. You get like everything looks like an Apple store now, and when your book looks like an Apple store, and you're writing a fantasy RPG, that's a problem. That's a pretty big problem.
It is, and I think a very relatable thing to people our age would be video games. I
Yeah,
remember growing up in an age where video games had a heads-up display that was always super cool and custom tailored to the game I was playing, and it made me feel in it to win it.
yeah.
Like especially something like Age of Empires, when you compare it to its modern counterpart, everything's so clean and refined. It's gross. Like I hate this the hospital aesthetic that's overtaken the world. And I used to be very nasty towards minimalism because I thought it was just a scapegoat and mask for laziness oftentimes. But after reading, what is it here? The Dark of Hot Springs Island. Absolutely fantastic book. This is minimalism done right. This isn't cutting corners around design philosophy or anything of that nature. This is good shit through and through. But it's written in a way that's, easily accessible at the table. Everything's kind of shorthanded, good use of bullet points, the art, and here, I'll do a super quick flip through. Um, all of the art is very basic. It kind of wraps around here and oh, you can't see anything. Never mind. Well, I tried, folks. Sorry.
It's all
Anyway,
good.
so my mind's been flipped a little bit, but it's also, I think that to condense something towards a really good minimalism might be more effort than to write things out longhand. So I don't know where I stand on the issue anymore.
Mhm. I think the minimal philosophy is the best way to approach it is to think as little as necessary.
Mm,
And this is, again, it's a hard thing to envision. It's a hard thing for a lot of people to come up with, because what is necessary in a given situation, that takes a lot of wisdom and a lot of planning and understanding to actually come upon what is necessary to reinforce what I'm doing in the text here, or to reinforce a specific idea or evoke a specific emotion in a given spot in the book. um, the problem is when you start taking too much out. That's where minimalism hurts, and that's where you start to lose the soul, and that's where you start to lose some of your ability to actually hook people, as you begin taking too much out.
absolutely.
And Curran McKenzie here in chat said the magic word, so I guess we should talk about the other side of this, because when you tell people um, to let go of their inhibitions and put the pedal to the metal, and really do something that stands out, something artistic, a lot of people's minds immediately jump to Morkborg. And Morkborg is a dumpster fire.
Let me say this, though, because this is a silver lining situation as far as I'm concerned. What an awesome golden opportunity to prove people otherwise.
Yeah.
Because realistically, as we've both seen a few times, Morkborg gets name dropped left and right as soon as you start talking about going any kind of fancy pantsy.
Yeah.
And here nor there, the game is what it is. But I think that it is a prime example of that self-derivative kind of punk rocky thing to where it's not the real deal. That shit's phony baloney, and I'll say it right now. It seems like a mockery, that skin suit thing. I
Yeah.
don't feel that it's yeah, what it's going for.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't want to speak too out of turn.
Yeah. And for people who haven't heard me talk about Morkborg, which a lot of you are very regular listeners, so you probably have, but I'll reiterate. I feel that Morkborg is covering up for weaknesses in the mechanics and weaknesses in the writing because they know what they have is threadbare, and I don't think they're terribly embarrassed about it. I don't think they care all that much. They just want to present the little that they have in some kind of dress. They basically have taken the like dumpster fire bag salad that you get in like the cheapest grocery store you can find, and they've covered it covered it with some kind of abomination ranch dressing that they made themselves, and now they're serving it to you. um and underneath it, like there's nothing of substance there, there's nothing of value there, but they've covered it in this weird uh ranch dressing that they threw a whole bunch of like cayenne pepper and uh turmeric and other like weird sauces in, and they're saying that this is their masterpiece. That's what you have with Morkborg.
Mork
And
Borg, tell me you have daddy issues without telling me you have fucking daddy
yeah,
issues.
and when you do something like I don't know what else to say about it. Like yes, they are over the top. They're over the top on purpose. They think it's cool, and it's not, because people that buy it will look at it, but they don't use it. And if anyone tells you that they're playing Morkborg and you actually ask them how, uh, they have to explain the other five systems that they've stolen things from just to make the one system that they want to play actually work, so that they
That's
can
fair.
show you the heavy metal book and be like, this is the thing that I play, isn't it cool? And they don't play that at all. They're playing some kind of bastard D&D generally, and just referencing that book. So you like that's the problem with Morkborg. That, and when you look at some of the offshoots of it, I'm thinking specifically of Cyborg when I'm talking about this. It's straight up eye cancer. You can't read that book. It doesn't it doesn't work.
There is a redeeming quality to it, and it's one that we have completely overshadowed and overlooked and completely disregarded, and I'm going to bring it up though, is that it's actually quite popular within the miniature skirmish gaming community, because what it essentially has done is it's one of the few game systems that has a real complete sense of freedom. You do whatever you want within this space as long as you're not a police officer in
Yeah.
cyberspace. Um, God forbid. And with that, it's really clicked up very. I don't know how intertwined it really is, but the 28 millimeter gaming movement, like the Inquisitor 28, the Mordheim community, they've kind of went hand in hand, and I see why. Is that there aren't really a lot of games that promote freedom of thought And I think that is actually where Morkborg really excels, is that they said, oh, our glass box of what a game is, we're going to smash it up into a glass pile of dust. We're going to put it in a bag. You reach your hand in and take what you like. It sucks. It's not really fun,
Hmm.
but there is a because like a lot of gaming used to be very invitational towards creators doing things themselves on their own volition. I remember the days back when Warhammer stuff used to have tutorials on how to make your own terrain and banners and all things cool. I
Hmm.
remember, I think it was B1 had a dungeon encounter key where you were supposed to fill up the dungeon yourself. There was a element in gaming that either required or encouraged people to take things into their own hands and start doing shit themselves. And I think we've completely lost that. And that's a real shame. And Morkborg, sadly, is one of the few places preserving that attitude.
Hmm. And I, I see what you're saying, and I agree. Like it's good to encourage people to use what you've presented to them as as a creator. You
A
use what,
creative haven, if you
yeah.
will.
Mhm. Like I encourage people with Night Haven, if you don't like the lore that I've put in there, or you don't particularly want to have to commit all of that to memory, you can take the city structure that I have outlined, import it into your own world, use your own lore, and basically run it that way. You can take the tools that I have given you and use them in different contexts to do what you want in your own cities, your own games. And I like um, I like doing that myself. I like taking from other modules and stuff like that. And so that's a good thing. The problem I have with Morkborg in that regard is I think they almost had to do that out of necessity. And maybe they set out to do that from the beginning, but it seems like that ethos is there's not a lot here. So whatever you can find, go ahead.
The more I think about it, kind of looking at it from this perspective, that might have been the primary goal of it, is a creative space, just a playground for people to dick around in.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If anything, that's kind of one of my long-term goals is, you
Hmm.
know, have a cool playground for people to do stuff in.
Yeah.
Because I think creatives encourage creatives, and that's a very good thing.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess kind of getting back to this again, the positive idea here. Um, finding an aesthetic that underscores the point you're trying to make. Um, Even tying this back into kind of the realm that I'm more comfortable with, the written realm. This requires a lot of soul searching and understanding what exactly you were trying to release into the world here. Um, it's more than just I'm releasing an adventure or I'm releasing a setting supplement or I have an adventure that has some setting material in it. You need to understand the emotions that you're trying to evoke with what you're doing, the environment that you are setting it up in. And I know some of you might be watching this and cringing a little bit because it sounds very story gamey. But even the most open ended, even something like Keep on the Borderlands, there are emotions and attitudes that are being specifically evoked with the things that are there.
Right. I
You
don't
are,
think having baby orcs in a cave was a random design choice.
yeah, exactly. Like even just the name Keep on the Borderlands, you are at kind of like the last stop of civilization before just this wide open wasteland. That, like, in and of itself should give you some kind of mental image of there is a keep, and beyond it, God knows what's out there.
Right.
Except you're going to go find out because, that's what you do. You're an adventurer.
Right. Ugh. Honestly, though, I keep looking out my window right to the right hand side of me here because I've had a bear running through my yard pretty much every day this last week, and I'm like, oh, you little bastard.
Yep, they're awake now.
Indeed. Hopefully, salmon will start coming up river soon.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, you put up a lot of really, really good points there in that you this all ties together so well. I feel like we're really on the same page with a lot of this because you do need to come up with your fundamental design philosophy, and then everything you're doing is going to try and reinforce these ideas. The words that you write are going to be the stones of this foundation, and then you're going to grout it on in with artwork and everything else. That's just kind of how it plays out until you create the structure you're looking to build. Um, there's a thing, how do I word this? When you are starting out a creative project, you might not know exactly what you're trying to make.
Hmm.
You might not know the exact parameters you're trying to make it in. I'm experiencing this myself where I thought HHH was going to be a little thing, and then I started dabbling all over the place. Um, and that's okay to learn as you grow. That's, I feel, very natural. But there's a core philosophy that I've been using personally, and I stole it from somewhere. It's like some Swedish rowboat crew or something of that nature. And when they were training, they were in like dead last in every competition, and they ended up making it to first after a couple seasons of training or something like that. I'm butchering the story, that's fine. But basically, everything they did was from this fundamental question of, will it make the boat go faster? Should I eat pizza or go drink a beer? Will it make the boat go faster? Well, probably not. And so you need to do a very similar thing as a creative director, the steward, the guardian of your project. If this is something you really care about, you need to be a little bit harsh, a little bit analytical, and maybe this art piece that gets turned in doesn't fit, and man, that would suck. Maybe something falls through and it just doesn't work, but you need to be able to make those harsh decisions on what is going to make a cohesive whole for the experience you're providing. Because there's been Jeff Talanian brought up the most important thing I've learned in my entire career as an artist, as a game designer, everything, is that the work is beyond you. It's not about you or your friends or your feelings. It's about the experience you're providing to people.
Yep.
And they're paying you good money for this. You need to make it worth their dollar. You can't cheap out in your, efforts. You can't cheap out in your decision-making process. The world's a harsh place and we don't have a lot of spending money. If we're entrusting you with that 15 bucks for a printed couple pages, I better get some good use out of it. Maybe it'll be fun to read. God could only hope.
Hmm.
Uh, this isn't RPGs have a low bar of entry. I think that's
They
pretty
do.
well understood in that you can get it on Google Docs and get a couple stock images or Creative Commons images, and for 2 hours of time and $0 spent, you can come up with a very gameable thing. But when you enter the marketplace of creative ideas, trying to actually push a product to the people, you are competing with everything else out there, not just for the dollars spent, but for the time spent reading. You have to make your project worth people's hours. That's a
Yep.
lot more to ask than $10, $15.
Hmm.
And that's what's going to get your game remembered, or if you're going to be forgotten in the nothing pile. And you're going to create 100 nothings and maybe one good thing. That's just kind of how it works. Is you know, you need to train a lot. You need to figure out what works, what doesn't, and you don't get to half-ass if you actually want to see the fruit of this. Because what I imagine that being, there's nothing that's going to be more gratifying than when I hear someone else's play results of HHH. When a game
Oh yeah.
master said, "Oh, I did this thing because you added this weird tool in here out of the 30 different magic items, and then I did this, and I came up with a crazy cave bear."
Hmm.
There's nothing like that's what I'm doing this for, is to help you game the best, most kick-ass experience you can.
Yeah.
And you don't get to be cheap or half-ass in that.
Yeah.
Not at all. And you got to come up with a good idea that's worth people buying into emotionally. And
Hmm.
art is going to be the easiest selling point on that. No one's not no one. I'm far less inclined to run a slapdash half-ass project, even if it's from one of my best friends,
Yeah.
than I would be from, wow, you really took your time, you thought this through, you worked it to reworked it, and, like Shiva, up and down, you get destroyed and rebuilt. And
Yeah.
then you come out with something wild out the kiln. And
Hmm.
that's what I want. That's how real creatives do their work. I don't think Jimi Hendrix was half-assing his guitar playing, you know?
No.
He didn't have a long run as a musician, but we still talk about him.
Hmm.
There's gonna be, especially in this age of AI, I'm not even going to knock people. They're going to be great competitors. They're going to be great contributors to the scene because it really does open up the toolbox. But you're going to have to be a goddamn good art director if you want to try and compete in the field of people's time. Because, oh man, I could watch Dune. I could go watch Lord of the Rings for the thousandth time rather than read your piece of shit module.
Yeah.
That's what you're really competing for. It's not $15,
Yeah.
dummy. Oh, Wolf is out. Here we go.
Yeah. And a lot of what this comes down to, practically speaking, for creatives is once you start to figure out these ideas, you have to actively sit down and focus on looking at art pieces, looking at books, looking at movies, just finding things that fit this aesthetic and saving them somewhere. Like one of the things that Wonkee had me
Perfect.
do.
I was just about to bring this up. Could you go over that for us?
Yeah, yeah. One
Perfect.
of the things that Wonkee had me do for this project was actually like create a Pinterest account, which um, there was a time where if someone asked me to create a Pinterest account, I would have laughed at them. But you know what I do now, it seems like it's essential, and so I've created and shared with him a Pinterest board that's just Nighthaven. Like it's basically just the essence of Nighthaven, and so I'm looking through all of this different stuff, and the thought as I look at this art, as I search for specific things, specific types of images, categories of images, the thought in my head is this Nighthaven? Does this evoke Nighthaven? And the more I see, not only like, yes, that's a filter that I use to get through certain things, but also as I see things that are interesting, that are intriguing, that idea of Nighthaven begins to morph and change and shift.
Yeah.
And it becomes more than what I thought it was, because your original conception is not, it should not be what you ultimately end up with. It should kind of go through some changes as put it in the kiln, as you fire it, as you stress test it, as you uh, disassemble and reassemble parts of it. It's going to fundamentally change at some point in the creative process, and that's one of the best ways, at least for the aesthetics, to really hammer home what you think this thing should be, is just to start looking at this stuff on Pinterest or on the drive through RPG PDFs that you have, or watching movies, going through your streaming service of choice and finding things that remind you of the kinds of feelings you want to evoke, or the specific imagery that you wish to present to people, and seeing how your ideas reinforce your choices, but also how they change by certain things that you're exposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important. Here's some harsh truth for the world is no matter how good you are at one thing, when you're starting up another creative project, it is its own. It's going to go through its terrible twos where it's
Hmm.
like you don't know what you're doing early on and it's just kind of shitstorming all over the place. You're going to have those spiteful teenage years, but if you shape this correctly, then by the end, if it makes the boat go faster, you're going to end up at least somewhere close to your initial design goal. And then, like you're finding out now, it's going to expand and branch out into so many different directions. And I think that it's going to be very important for people who do want to make good projects to come up with that visual library is kind of the term I've latched onto.
Yeah.
In that, you're not looking for just things for people to copy off of, but this is the language, this is the visual language we're going to be using for Nighthaven. And you've put all kinds of things in there. There's old like illuminated manuscript drawings I've seen or something of that nature. There was like actual armor photos. There's things all over the place. But me as an artist getting to go through, it's like getting to pick your brain, but you already did the Tinder swipe left or right for me. It's just like, oh, this is the goods you want. I get you.
Hmm.
And so if I was an art director for an indie company, what I would do starting out a project, which mind you, well, actually, I kind of am an art director, but disregard that anyway. Besides that point, um, I would find a couple people you really like and you think that they would already understand at least a part of your vision. They at least kind of speak a similar language. I'd come up with a Pinterest board. Once you get a couple people saying, yeah, I might like to work on this project, you send them that Pinterest board and then you double make sure. Because the last thing you want to do is give a dude who does great work a pile of artwork and have them completely misunderstand the project.
Yeah.
I've done that once or twice early on. It's embarrassing. No one likes it. That's another thing too is, people, there is the negotiation between the artist and the creative author or whoever else is doing this kind of a thing. You need to make sure it's a ping pong, a dialogue, an exchange to make sure that the idea is getting shaped right, because you're not going to be able to go through and place their mental camera angle in the same place you see it. The fur texture is not going to be the same as you see it. So what you want to do is come up with foundational elements that can constantly be referred back to.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It it's a little thing. For a lot of people, it seems like a silly thing or a stupid thing. It's an important thing, though. It's a really important thing to begin that process. It's kind of like the pruning process of your idea to
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
begin stripping away certain things, because everyone, like, you may start out with a kitchen sink idea and then realize that certain things don't belong there, or maybe more things belong there than you
Right.
initially thought. um, but it's this creative process, and it's something that honestly is best undertaken with help from other people. And this is a whole separate problem that is probably best suited to its own talk. But this kind of one man band approach that so many people take, I understand that's out of necessity for a lot of people, but you need this process of bouncing. Even if you're the only one actually working on the project, you need someone to talk to about this project, to bounce these ideas off of, to help you refine this vision and refine the aesthetic of it, especially if those people are artistically inclined, because they will be able to point you in the right direction as far as these things go. So begin building out these. It seems very lame to call them mood boards, but that's essentially what you're
No, it's a
doing.
mood
Is,
board.
yeah,
It's a mood board.
you're creating a mood board. Create a mood board for your project. Um, Begin to find out what fits, what doesn't fit. See the commonalities. See the contrast between what ends up on that board, and then begin working through it with other people, whether they're going to be contributing to your project or not. Just, to have another voice there to identify things that you might have missed yourself.
Absolutely. And I think it's another important thing to, like, this is such a critical step that you
Yeah.
can't mess up on. You don't get to go backwards, really,
Mm.
without restarting and building back from there. That was one of my main problems I found in writing this module early on. And what I mean by that is you want to get the foundational problem solving done while you're still in the early stages. The way I like to think about any kind of a project that I work on either as a freelancer or anything else is there's the blue sky kind of all ideas are out there. We're still forming things, gathering from the muses, whatever you want to call it. You're still in that gathering stage. You're going to have some
Yeah.
written stuff for sure, but it's not finishing. And then you
Mm.
have your production pipeline. That's the pick and shovel trench work that no one wants to see, no one likes doing, and it's just work.
Yeah.
And then you have your finishing steps, and that's the cherry on the pie, that kind of a thing.
Hmm.
um, and so the last thing you want to do is be halfway through production pipeline and then realize, oh, I need a foundation rework. That's the easiest way to kill a project. It's going to kill your motivation, it's going to kill your budget. It's you've already wasted 200 hours of time.
Hmm.
Like, no, 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 no. You want to be very thorough with what you're setting out to do.
Yeah.
Because, like I keep saying, I'm learning from experience right now on this. I wish I would have done better because I set out to write a 48-page module and it ended up bloating something like double that.
Hmm.
That I had to go back 8 times to rework what I had already written based on bad foundation. So I just can't stress enough how important that really is.
Yep. Yeah, and this is and not to get back on one of my favorite hobby horses here, but this is the problem that I continuously see with MCDM
We're
is
writing for their game. Why are you trashing it? Ryan,
oh
you
god.
trying to lose our future sponsorship here? I want my name tag.
Mhm.
Official reps, maybe.
Yeah, you want to make one of those videos one day.
I do.
Do your best Matt Colville
I
impression in front
want
of the
to do
camera.
3-hour advertisements.
But like just these videos that you see, he's talking about the playtesting, he's talking about the ways that he has run people through this game that people have already paid like millions of dollars for. And then you just see a video pop up and he's like, I've changed the entire core mechanic of this game that I've been playtesting for 4 years. And you're just like, what are you doing?
There's nothing wrong with learning on the job.
Right.
I've always thought that being successful was preparation meets luck, or luck was preparation meets timing, something like that. You
Hmm.
know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I think it just is a good, well-sponsored YouTube channel at this point in time. Holy shit, because I haven't been keeping up to date. I didn't know they were reworking the entire core game. This is our jam. This is our future. We're relying on this.
Yeah, because they went from this like roll 2d6
Hmm.
mechanic to roll 2d6 and consult a chart to see where your success lands for like every single weapon. And it's become just this convoluted mess now, just to avoid one, a failure state, and two, having to roll a d20. it, at this point, it like
2d6 works when it's so, like, I was a die-hard War Machine and Hordes player. Privateer Press's Iron Kingdom setting, for those familiar, and it relies on a 2d6 mechanic. The entire game is centered around that one mechanic, though, and it works because of that. It's not something you wantonly flip back and forth through, because that shows a lack of clear design decision making. Like,
mhm.
what to have, they got money for this, right?
Yeah,
Cool, dude.
millions of dollars.
Like I keep saying, I love hearing these RPG horror stories. We are going to look so good in the near future.
Hmm.
Like, god damn.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, make our jobs easier, people.
Hmm. Unfortunately, and these conversations always go this way. We are running out of time now. We are kind of towards the end of our allotted time here. So I guess final thoughts on this topic of aesthetic. Anything you want to leave people with that we haven't discussed already? Um,
I'll do
go.
the quick summary of all things that are really important here. Okay. Figure out what you actually want to do and what you're actually willing to put your highest efforts towards. Don't sell yourself cheap on a project just so you can half ass it.
Yeah.
Do something meaningful. Put in the proper precautions to make sure that the things you do in the future are well set up to be successful. Don't build a castle on like a wooden scaffolding. That seems dumb. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
like that's just don't do that. And then like it's so true. Just don't bullshit yourself with the kind of project you want to make because no matter what you're doing, it's going to take a fair amount of your time. It's going to take all your heart and soul and way more money than it's probably worth to you financially at the end of the day, unless you're really trying to kill in this industry. Make it count because, like, would you rather have a book that you're going to be resentful at knowing you didn't put your hardest efforts into at the end of the day? Or would you maybe even not finish because you set yourself up with such a lofty goal? Either way, you need to figure out a way to push yourself to make your dreams come true because no one's going to do it for you.
Hmm. Yep.
And find a way to make it work. Like, if there's not a way for you, make one. That's just the way of it.
Yeah.
Guts and glory, bitch.
Guts and glory. And to end us out here, we got a $10 super chat from Double D, Diversity and
Dude, Double
Dragons,
D coming at it.
saying, "Great
Love it.
discussion, fellas. Always love hearing you two together. Thank you for the support,
Thank you
Double
for the
D.
same.
We're glad that you're here." And I guess one more question to close us out, just to round out this discussion. Luau Lu, oh, disappeared. Luau Lu has a question for us. Our favorite RPG books as far as aesthetics go.
Dare Luck Club's up there. It
It,
completely matches. Like, I only got to do a quick flip through. I'm planning on buying like 5 copies of that game. Like that, it hits the nail for what it's trying to do. I love it.
mhm,
My absolute favorite though, DCC. DCC MCC. It's not getting beaten as far as I'm concerned for enjoyability of the reading experience.
mhm. DCC is definitely up there for me. Just for the purposes of giving a different answer, to satisfy those of you out there who don't just want to hear us talk about DCC again, even though it's phenomenal. Um, the box set Dark Sun
Mm.
material
Oh yeah,
is
baby.
that's up there for me because you've got Brahms art. The line art in there is good too. It's not just the paintings. The paintings are obviously brilliant. The line art's great too, but also the little touches, the little um, atmospheric flavor text that you get, that reinforces it, and even the somewhat sterile second edition aesthetic doesn't really take away from the Dark Sun material, in my opinion. So that would be my answer. There is the box set Dark Sun stuff from its very introduction in second edition.
I need to shout out my second favorite though because it's just if it's not equal as 100%, it's right up there. Pretty much anything Planet X Games
Oh
does. Levi understands what he's trying to do. He doesn't cut corners around it. He comes up with a cool vision for the shit he wants to see in the world, then he makes it happen. He
yeah.
finds the right team of people to do the job and kind of embodies everything we've been talking about here.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
definitely.
dude's the man.
He is. He is, and Levi if you're watching this right now, we all missed you at North Texas, and we continue to wish you a speedy recovery. Um, we love you, man. We
Yeah.
love you.
Ooh, Telenium with Hyperborea too. Very good aesthetics. Those are the
Yep.
three. I'll stop there. I'll stop there.
Gotcha. So, guys, that's going to do it for Get in the Ring this week. That's it for Rollin Bones this week. Next week, to kick off July, I will be interviewing John Watson. And appropriately enough, Dark Sun came up because he will be talking about bringing Dark Sun um, spiritually into the world of DCC, which is something that I have talked about myself in the past. I talked about that on This Old Dungeon with our friend Luau Lu. And so this is going to be a great conversation. Those of you who love Dark Sun, you'll want to check this out. John's a really cool guy. We'll probably talk about weightlifting as well because he is also a devotee of the iron.
Dude is
Uh,
jacked.
he is. He is a giant man. But yeah, that's what we're talking about next week. So until then, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for supporting. And until next time, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I will see you guys next time.